What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I'm Jonathan, your host, and here at RedBeard Outdoors, I talk about faith, family, fitness, and the outdoors. That's why you've tuned in. I appreciate you so much for all your support, for sharing it with other people, for continuing to show up every time there's a new podcast coming out. We've got some amazing things planned for 2025. Of course, a couple more giveaways throughout the rest of the year here in 2024. And just stay tuned, guys. I'm really excited to share all of this with you. But today, I'm going to give you a recap. Instead of it being a gear review, today's Tinkering Tuesday. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about things that I want to tinker with moving forward, lessons I've learned up to this point now that the elk season, the archery elk season, traditional archery elk season is over here in Utah. It ends early. It's kind of silly, in my opinion. I wish they would extend it out further, but we do get the late archery season, which technically starts like right after the regular archery season ends. So, with all that being said, guys, here we go. Today, I'm going to go over my elk season here in 2024. Before we get into that, got to crack one of these open, nice and cold. Orange is still my favorite, guys. Until those summer flavors get out with the grape smash and the summerade, orange is the goat. With that, okay, let's get into this recap here. So this year I was planning on going out a couple buddies, kind of lined up, but either way, my fallback is always to go solo. And I'll tell you a little bit about my setup. I have an RX8 that is the 30 inch. I think it's 30 and 3/4, almost a 31-inch bow. That was my backup bow for the elk hunt. My main bow is the Alpha X33 from Hoyt with some America Best bowstrings on it, and it's 80-pound bow. I did the glue-in system with Evolution, and the arrow shaft being the VAP TKO from Victory. All of that my plan was to shoot the mechanical as my primary, and then if I needed a fixed head, to have the fixed head from Evolution in the quiver. I had 2 of those and 4 mechanicals in my quiver. So there's kind of the breakdown of the gear. And then let's see here. I need to grab something real quick. I brought my kill kit I had a couple of different Montana Knife Company knives in it. I had this one right here. I always carry, let's see here. There we go. Okay. So I had this one in my pocket, which is kind of my EDC anyway. The MagnaCut Mini Goat 2.0 by Montana Knife Company. That one's always in my pocket every day. And then I had this in my pack as well, which is the Speed Goat Ultra, the carbon fiber scales. That was in my pack. And then I had my main one was going to be my Jackstone, which is right here. Got put in the kill kit because it needed to be cleaned. I haven't quite cleaned it yet because just haven't gotten around to it. But there you go, the Jackstone. So there we go. Those are kind of the main gear items of the backpack, of course, being the 5K from Initial Ascent. Absolutely love that pack. That is the go-to pack. Amazing at carrying weight. We'll get into that in a little bit. So started out in a unit where here in Utah, we can take our over-the-counter tag and go into certain limited entry units and hunt cows and spikes, which, again, I've gotten one bull down, which is this guy right here over my shoulder. And he was a stud. He's out of Colorado last year. That's where I focused most of my hunting, was Colorado last year, and ended up getting that bull down and was super stoked about that. The 2 years prior, I did not tag out in Utah and was still kind of going through that learning phase of there's a lot of things going on. Utah is one of the harder over-the-counter hunts that are left, and I was still learning about elk. So all of that to be said, now we're here, 2024. I've got a bull under my belt, still just one, so I'm still not being picky. I'm great with a cow, a spike, anything elk. I'm ready to put down. And I went into this limited entry unit that first week of August or of September, and In this first week of September, I learned a lot. I had a buddy come down with me for 3 days. I appreciated his willingness to come down and hang out and go and hunt this area with me. But we were in bugles, either seeing elk, hearing elk, or both every single day during that hunt. And it was incredible. The biggest thing though is the majority of the time the bulls that were really bugling and piping off didn't really have any cows with them for some reason, and I come to find out later why as I go back into my archives of knowledge that I've learned from the different people that I've learned from about elk. But with that, the first day that I was there, I spotted some elk on this high, far off ridge. Found a way to get around to them for the next day, and I spotted him again and went in after him, made a plan, and assumed that these bulls had cows with them. I didn't see any cows in the spotting scope, but I wanted to go in and just take a look because I was anxious to get up there and check it out. So I get in there. It was about noonish by the time I finally got to the spot that I wanted to be. So I sat down, had some lunch, got in the shade, and checked the weather, and there's supposed to be a storm coming in. So, well, I sat there and just kind of figured I'd wait it out. I had some good rain gear and wasn't too concerned about being where I was with the storm rolling in. So, just sat it out. And then I started hearing some chirping, like cow calls, at about, I want to say it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'd sat there for a couple hours, started hearing some chirping. The wind was in my face compared to where uh, the chirping was. And so, I sat there, listened. There was a couple bugles, and I looked around. There was no people there. There hadn't been anyone coming in on the trail that I was in. There was no way to access this area really except for that trail itself. And so, I was really excited to know that I was getting into the elk just the second day that I was there. And kind of looking around, and as I'm glassing this one little knob that's right in front of me, where the bull was kind of off wrapped around to the right, and the chirping was kind of over there with him, I saw one lone cow, and I watched her for, man, I don't even know, it was probably a good 10 minutes or so, looking, glassing all above her, below her, couldn't see any other cows. And so it was kind of open-ish between me and her on this hillside, and so I wanted to make sure that there was no other eyeballs. Um, and again, I've got the cow spike tag in this unit, so I was really excited, thinking, here we go, my first stalk of the season. Get my bow on and or my bow ready, arrow nocked, and at this point she's about 500 yards away from me. I drop my pack and I throw on the stealth bombers from SheepFeet, and these are the stalking shoes. And I make my way up the hill. Well, I get to the point where I recognize this burnt stump, and here's kind of a little tip. If you're going in for a stalk of any kind, I recommend taking multiple pictures of that area, either through your spotting scope or your binoculars, or if you're close enough, a picture just off of your phone so you can have that handy and be able to recognize different points that of the area that you're in. And so I'd done that. I recognized this burnt stump and a couple of the trees around it, so I knew I was in the general area of where this cow had just been, not 10 minutes prior. So I had closed the gap from 500 yards down to less than 100 yards. And I'm sitting there glassing, and then I see some movement, and she was 70 yards away from me. But man, this was one of those shots that would have been tack worthy, total archery challenge worthy, because it really, it was not a shot that I wanted to take on a live animal. I would have taken it on foam, but I didn't want to take it on a live animal because I couldn't tell how far she was quartered to me. Her head was down feeding, and there was a branch kind of covering her body where I would want to hit her with an arrow. So all of that to be said, I didn't want to take the shot where she was. And so, I go to take another step, and of course I'm focused on her, and I didn't recognize down below me there was a stick. So I cracked a stick. Her head immediately shoots up. Again, the wind is in my face. Everything else is in my favor. I have cover behind me, which that's another tip that I've learned Guys out there hunting, make sure that your cover is behind you. You're using shadows, shade. If the sun is not allowing you to have shade, at least have some cover behind you to break up your, uh, your shape. You don't want to be in the cover. You don't want to be in the bushes because then you're not able to draw your bow back and take the shot. So you want to make sure that the cover is behind you and you're close enough to it that it can break up your shape. This is what I've learned. So just sharing that with you as I'm remembering and telling the story. So she couldn't figure out what it was that had made that stick crack. And we had kind of a stare down for, it felt like forever. It always feels like forever, especially when you're in an uncomfortable position where I'm putting most of my body weight back on the foot that's not cracking the stick and holding my bow in an awkward position with the release on the bow, etc. It was not a good spot to be in. Well, she finally puts her head down, starts feeding again, and then something else happened. I can't remember if it was me moving my foot off the stick or what, but anyway, it made some noise again. She perked her head up and she barked. Now, she didn't speed off, but she barked, which for those of you out there that have been hunting elk for any amount of time know that that is the worst sound. You never want to hear it coming from an elk. And of course, she made that sound. I didn't hear any other elk spook. So she just kind of picked her head up, barked, and then she worked her way up and around the knob to the left. And at that point, the day's kind of going on, and I was wanting to get up to her. So again, the wind is in my face. She had gone around this knob, and so I just start booking it. She had gone this way and around the knob. I start kind of veering this way to keep, again, the wind down on me and also the cover of kind of a little bit of a tree line right here for her, and so she couldn't see my movement. So I kind of came up around here. When I got up parallel with where she had been, I was going to cut across there on the ridge line, just below the ridge line. And that cow was super smart, had stopped when she got just barely around that knob on the left hand side, and she had stopped to listen. And I was making a ton of noise at this point, running up the hill, trying to get just level with her to start the stalk again to come around that back side of the knob. And well, she caught me. She had poked her head back up, and I saw her. Her and I locked eyes. We were, 50 yards away. Her body was on that other side of the knob, and she had turned around to again listen and check out what was going on. So she spotted me, barked again, and she took off. I stayed up there for a little bit. There was some good bugles going on, pretty close. I, again, didn't see any other cows that evening or spikes, so kind of made my way down. And that night it's probably a good thing I didn't kill her in that moment up there because it was a terrible hike out. I didn't follow the exact trail that I had come up. I thought if I got to the bottom, there would be a trail. There was no trail. It was a lot of deadfall, a little bit of a creek. I ripped some pants. I whacked my bow around quite a bit. Surprised it didn't derail on me a couple times. But I made it out of there, made it back to camp, and met my buddy Adam over at BlackOvis, and we made our plan for the next couple days. So just kind of fast forwarding through the next couple days, we get into that area. We each night we'd come back to camp. We'd make a plan for the morning. We'd split up, kind of divide and conquer the area. Because again, we're hunting cows and spikes, so we're not really doing any collar setups because we're not trying to get a bull to come in necessarily. We're trying to listen for the bulls and get in on them with their cows. And so over the next couple days, I came across I had 3 encounters at less than 30 yards with some beautiful mature bulls that were bugling, grunting, all of the things, but they didn't have any cows with them. And that first week of September is kind of known for that, where the big mature bulls kind of break off from the bachelors and from all the other elk and kind of establish their territories, it seems like. And they were just talking, bugling, talking, letting each other know where they're at. And that's kind of what we dealt with for the next until the spike cow hunt ended that Friday evening. And got some amazing videos. It just, again, had an amazing experience. And that's one of the cool things, in my opinion, about Utah is that you can take your over-the-counter tag and go into some of these premier units and hunt cows and spikes and get this amazing experience where you get to hear the bugles, you get to see some mature bulls and have less hunting pressure and just enjoy being out there with the elk and the bugles. There was a couple times where they were bugling right outside of camp. One of these big bulls I came across maybe 200 yards outside of camp. Another one came through our camp at 3 in the morning, cracking sticks and bugling, waking me up, which anyone that's been with me in the woods, or my wife as well, can vouch for this. I'm a very deep sleeper, and it woke me up that night at 3 in the morning for him coming through the camp. So all of that was an amazing experience. And I came home, decided to spend that week catching up on work, spending time with the family, doing the dad thing, and loving being at home for a little bit, taking a break, resting the body, and getting refueled. And and it was an awesome time. Absolutely love spending time with the family. So we've moved through the second week of September, and I was just trying to decide who all could come with me, if I was going to get some people together or not, and go and hit the last couple days of the September hunt for elk here in Utah, which again ends on the 18th. So, with all of that being said, I went out Friday night and decided to spend the last 5 days of the hunt up in this other particular unit that is an over-the-counter any elk tag or any elk of the hunter's choice is what the tag is called, the over-the-counter tag. So, went up there and it was a completely different scenario up in this area. This area that I went to had a ton of hunters. So many people, so many rigs, so many camps, four-wheelers, e-bikes, trucks, just everything that you can think of. And that can be a little discouraging sometimes, especially when you know this area isn't known for the elk talking. It's very thick. You don't get to go out and glass very much at all. There's very small pockets that you can glass, and the elk usually aren't in those areas. So it's kind of a chess game. And I say that because you learn to either, one, you can either complain about it and leave the unit, or two, you can do similar to what I've learned to do over the last couple years of hunting these areas that are high pressured here in Utah, is you can learn how to play that chess game a little bit, play the pressure of other people and use them to your advantage. So I've got an amazing company that I work with, Slayer Elk Calls. They make great, phenomenal reeds. They make an awesome bugle tube. They make waterfowl calls and a bunch of other game calls as well, if you're interested in that. But I didn't get a chance to really use the bugle tube because I knew in this area the elk just aren't talking. They're not talking until later in September when all the bow hunters have moved out, and they'll talk at night, but they don't talk during the day. So I go in Saturday. I sit this meadow, again, public land pressure. I've been there since 2:30. At about 5:30, when it's starting to get kind of prime time, these two guys come walking right through the meadow, stand over the wallow, kind of kick around. I'm sure they were looking at sign. They had no idea I was there. I was in a brushed-in blind, and in my head, I was like, why don't you just go ahead and pee in the wallow while you're at it? Because you're just putting your scent all over the place. And then they sat at the top of the meadow with the wind coming downhill and over the evening and blowing out the entire meadow. So, I'm sitting there that first night. I was a little frustrated. And this right at about 7 o'clock ish, and sunset was I think 7:30 that evening. Right at about 7, I hear this, and elk and deer are very different when it comes to how they crash through the woods. Deer bound and elk run, and they just sound a lot louder when they're spooked. And so I heard this crashing coming up from behind me to the right, and at about 15 yards, this cow comes out into the meadow right to my right. And I've got my bow ready. I've been sitting there for almost 5 hours at this point, and I was ready to take the shot on this cow, but of course she stopped where her head was poked out on this side of the tree. So the tree's here, her head's on this side, and her body's right behind the tree. And I'm just waiting for her. I've got the release in hand, the arrow's already knocked. I'm ready to draw back and get the shot off. And she it's almost like her head went on her butt, because I saw her head come up. She caught the wind from the guys on that side of the meadow, and she boogied out of there like it was nothing. And She barked 4 times, and that was it. I didn't hear any other elk. No other elk came in with her. It's just kind of strange how many different encounters I had that were just kind of solo elk. And I'm sure there were elk with her that just kind of worked their way, didn't come to the meadow, worked their way around, and just decided not to come up to that meadow and that wallow. And so that night, obviously a little frustrated, but hey, it's public land hunting, guys. Like, you just kind of have to. That's just something you have to deal with if you choose to do public land hunting. So Sunday comes around, and Sunday was a day that I didn't hear or see any elk whatsoever. That was frustrating. Got a little demoralizing. Saw lots of people, ran into a lot of people. Um, didn't see any elk. And so again, I'm sitting there in my canvas cutter at night, just kind of reminiscing on what I could do better, how I can use this hunting pressure to my advantage, and where I could go. So I ended up switching. Actually, got up, packed up my camp real quick, and switched an area that I had been in before, but I hadn't really hunted a ton in years prior, and I knew it held elk. It's a great area, so I went in that next morning, and as I was moving spots that morning, I'd come down to a main trail and ran across some older guys that they were on four-wheelers. We discussed a little bit about who was going where and where they had seen people, etc. And I found this one little draw that just had amazing openness, but also cover at the same time. It was some aspen groves, a few pines, had some awesome fresh grass. It was on the kind of northeast facing. The draw was kind of northeast facing. So it just had all the signs that I was kind of looking for to find elk. And, that evening or that afternoon on Monday, I decided to sit in that draw. And so I'm sitting there in the draw, and I found the spot that again gave me a lot of. I could shoot at distance, a lot of windows that were open, and I'm sitting there, about 3:30 ish or so, and I took a nap. I had some snacks, took a nap, woke up, was listening to Tulsi Gabbard's book, which, if you haven't listened to her book yet or read her book, I highly recommend that you go check it out. For the Love of Country by Tulsi Gabbard. Absolutely love that book. It was an awesome book. I was listening to that, and I was going through with iPhones. They kind of make these memories slideshows, and the last couple of Septembers, where I'd been at, who I'd been with, and then even prior to elk hunting, what I'd been doing with the family in September. It's always been a fun month. I really enjoy getting out in September, enjoying the changing of the leaves and the weather and everything along those lines. So I'm reminiscing on that, and I'm like, man, like, I gotta pee, And I'd been sitting there for a while, so I didn't want to blow out the area, even if there were just deer or whatever. And so I just kind of like slowly get up and took a knee, or got to my knees, and went to go look around. And I looked behind me to the left, and there was a bull. It was a good five. It was five on one point on one side. I didn't quite see the other because to me it didn't matter. It was a bull. I wasn't counting tines. I was wanting one down. And so my arrow's already nocked. My release was on my bow. I ranged him. I ranged him again, and it was kind of like bouncing around just based on some of the brush that was there. So I waited for him. He turned, and he gave me a good broadside view of him, and I ranged him, and it was a beautiful hallway shot, just set up perfectly. The lighting was amazing. There were no other elk around that I could see. There was nothing else that could spook him from my movement. So I bring the bow up, and I draw back, and I kind of had to lean forward a little bit to get into that hallway from where I was kneeling to get into the hallway of the shot. Leveled the bubble. Remembered going through the mantra in my head of pull, and then pow, it broke. The release broke. It was beautiful. I was watching the arrow, and for anyone that knows, taking a shot at an animal at a little bit of a distance, somehow time slows down, and I was able to watch that and that arrow fly. and it was just going right where that pin was buried in him. And then all of a sudden, it deflected up and to the right, right over his back, and smacked a couple trees on the way out. And he boogied, ran out. Again, I didn't see any other elk, didn't hear any other elk with him. He kind of ran out of my life, and man, I remember that frustration uh, of hearing the trees get smacked by the arrow, watching that arrow fly over his back. It was a 60, I was like 62-yard shot, something like that. So well within my wheelhouse. I told myself nothing more than 70. Well, I couldn't figure out what was going on because it was a hallway shot, and most of the trees in that hallway area were aspens, so they don't have any, branches going this way. There wasn't a lot of brush. So I'm wondering what deflected it. Well, I just sat and was listening, kind of frustrated at the same time, and decided to go up and check out the spot. And I walked up, and as I'm walking, there's nothing that could be causing this issue until I get up to right about where the bull was standing, maybe 5 yards in front of him. There was this skinny, kind of dead tree that, I could have wrapped my hand around. Super skinny tree. And it had one branch, so this is the tree, one branch that came off and kind of curled down like that, like my pinky there. And my arrow, right where that bends, right there on that second knuckle, was about where I had buried the pin for my arrow to go through that bull. And I could see a mark in it. I'm assuming it's where my arrow smacked that kind of stronger, more reboundy part of the branch right there and just deflected up and over. If it had deflected down, it would have been into the bull. If it had deflected sideways, it would have been into the bull, but it deflected up and over. And I remember being so frustrated because during this entire time, something I haven't mentioned is that every day I start my day off in the elk woods with a prayer of, Father, if it's your will, please provide me an opportunity to have a shot at one of these majestic animals, so that I can bring the meat home for the family. I can have an amazing experience. I can just enjoy this bounty and nature the way that God has provided it for us. And so any opportunity for me is a blessing from God. And so, I'd gotten into cow, I'd gotten into multiple mature bulls that I wasn't able to shoot due to the tag. And then I got into the cow that Saturday. That Sunday I didn't see anything. And then going from that to having an actual shot on a bull, I was super grateful, but I was super frustrated at the same time that I had not recognized that there was a branch in the way. So, with that, all of that being said, I kind of followed his tracks just to see if there was anything that I could do. He got into some thick stuff that I just didn't want to. He was already obviously on high alert after running out of there. I didn't want to bust the bull out and not have an opportunity the following day at that area, because I'd found a spot where I imagined in my semi-knowledgeable brain of what elk do is there were people over here on this side of the mountain. There were people in this drainage over here. There weren't anyone in this drainage for multiple days in a row. So I'm sure the elk were feeling good in that area. So I didn't want to bust them out. So I headed down the mountain, met some people at the trailhead, just kind of discussed how our days went, etc. And said to myself, that evening I was going to head back in there in the morning. Well, the next morning, woke up at 4:30, and it was hailing and lightning and thunder and just disgusting, awful, terrible, no good, very bad weather. And in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I've got 2 days left. I had Tuesday and Wednesday. Thanks to my beautiful wife that's taking the kids during the week when she just barely, got a promotion and started a new job and was figuring that out, and was willing to still take on the kids when normally during the day that's my responsibility, because I get to work from home. And all of that, being super grateful for that, being very frustrated that I had missed a bull, and I should be home at that point. All of those things were going through my head, and of course I wake up to the thunderstorm, and I checked the Garmin weather, and it wasn't supposed to stop until like 8 or 9, something like that. So, I went back to sleep frustrated because one, I didn't want to go in soaking wet. I knew the elk weren't moving due to hailing and thundering and lightning the way that it was, along with the nasty wind. Didn't want to blow out that drainage due to the wind, etc. So I waited that out. Then I, got up when there was a break in the weather, made some breakfast, and drove up to the trailhead, and then it started again. So once that second, once I had gotten to the trailhead and the weather finally subsided, I started heading in, had my bag packed, had my rain gear on, and start walking in. It was about a mile and a half to the bottom of this mountain, and then about a half mile or so up the mountain where I was going. So I get in there, to where I was supposed to start heading up, and I hear a bugle kind of off to the left side, wrapped around that the other side of the drainage. So not in the drainage, but wrapped around. I kind of look at my map. I'm like, okay, well, with the wind the way that it is right now, I didn't want to blow out that drainage for the evening sit. So I head back up that way, worked my way up, took my time. There was various different times where it was raining or hailing again. I got into spots where I could smell where the elk had been that morning, but the bugle faded. I'm sure I knew a general area of where they had bedded, but it was not worth, again, going in there and busting them out. Sometimes, and this is unfortunate, as you may know that there's elk in certain areas, but if it's too thick for you to get in without setting their alarms off or whatever, you're just going to do more damage than good. And so you have to play the patience game. So I ended up getting up to the top of that knob and dropped down into the saddle. And at that point, it was about 1 in the afternoon. The wind was blasting uphill, so in my favor to head down the mountain. And I sit down, starts to rain again, broke out the snacks, had enjoyed some snacks, waited for the rain to die down, and then the blue skies came. So I took off my rain gear, packed it in my backpack, and started heading down this kind of trail slash creek, whatever it used to be. It was a really good trail actually, and so I'd head down, I'd drop a little bit in elevation, and then I would glass, kind of still hunting and glassing just to see if they were still, because at this point it's about 2:30 in the afternoon, if the elk were still bedded, if they were in this deadfall nastiness, if they were in some of the aspen groves that I was passing. And I get down, I dropped, I don't know, maybe 200 feet, and I had paused again to glass off into this deadfall, glass over here into this aspen grove, and then right below me, just off the trail, I glimpsed some tan, and I was super excited because at that point I didn't care again, cow, bull, spike, whatever. I wanted to get home to my family. I wanted to fill a tag. I wanted to bring elk meat home, and all of those things were going through my head. And then I calmed myself down, broke out my binoculars this time instead of just the rangefinder, verified that there was openings to shoot and no branches, and then I broke out the rangefinder, and he was 25 yards, right at, it was a little over 25 yards, and I was like, man, this is awesome. So the wind was in my face. He hadn't seen me. He hadn't heard me. He had no idea it was there. His head was down feeding. It was perfect. And so, I get to full draw, and I start my mantra, get the bubble level, put the pin where I wanted it, and then of course, you know, past the aiming, getting out of the aiming room and going to pull. And as I was pulling, he took a step, but so say he was broadside. These are his back legs right here, front. He's broadside to me. He took a step like this. And so he kind of went from here, if I was aiming here, in his the vital V, whatever you want to call it, right there behind the shoulder. He took 2 steps this way and turned. So where did that arrow end up when the arrow broke? Right in his hind quarter. And I just remember seeing the arrow go. Um, I did see blood. I saw him kind of jump, and he went parallel. So I got another shot. So while I saw that arrow go and hit him and see him kind of go parallel, he started to kind of like go back at like he had been pinched or bit or something like that, and was kind of like trying to get like, almost like a splinter out of his back hind quarter. And so I knocked another arrow, get the full draw, and I let another arrow go. This one, because his head was back like that, but he was still punched right through his shoulders into that chest cavity, palm station, whatever you want to call it. And that one made him go and bed down at 30 yards from me. Uh, I was super excited. I was super grateful because I just got done having a conversation with Heavenly Father while I was eating my snacks, waiting for that rain to die off about, he had provided so many opportunities, how grateful I was for those. If I could just ask for one more opportunity that day, and he provided. The roller coaster, the ups and downs of, this was probably my last opportunity. Who knows? Who knows if I would have had more? But the fact that he had taken those steps and turned by the time my arrow released, um, that was devastating. But at the same time, I was able to get a second shot off. He bedded down. All of that was going through my head. Uh, and I went to go kneel down to say a prayer and say thank you, because he had just bedded down, and I was watching him die, and right there in front of me. And as I kneeled down, I cracked a stick, and he got up, and you could tell his back leg wasn't working. He hobbled off. I knew it was good shot. The first one not so much obviously, but that second one was definitely a really good shot. The first one had gotten some good penetration, and he hobbled off, and I didn't hear him crash. I sat there and listened. I gave him about 45 minutes, and then I went down to where my first arrow, would have hit him, and I found the first arrow. I got about 12 inches of penetration through that hind quarter. It was with a mechanical, the mechanical from Evolution, so the hide from Evolution with a glue-in system, like I mentioned. And I found that, and then I found some blood. And what I could see was wherever his hind quarter would rub on a tree, you'd get that dark blood. And then he had some other blood that had some lung tissue, had some bubbles, bright red blood. It was really good blood. But when he had hobbled off, what I realized was my second shot was a little high, so it's kind of high lungs. And for anyone again that knows anything about elk or deer, high lungs are fatal, but they don't leave very good blood trails. Excuse me. And that was my biggest thing, was I was concerned because I didn't hear him crash, I didn't see him at that point, and I was losing blood trail. So anyway, I found my first arrow, follow the blood trail, and then I started gridding back and forth, and I spent about an hour and a half gridding in this deadfall. It was pretty open deadfall, but still, anyone that knows has ever killed an elk in deadfall, when they lay down, their antlers can look like branches, their bodies can look like logs. It was just, I was getting really frustrated. And, that again, having another conversation with my Heavenly Father, I knelt down and just said, Father, you provided that opportunity, the shot opportunity. Things did not go perfect. Um, Whatever the variables were that caused those things to not go perfect, I've lost blood trail. Please help me find this bull before it's dark and I have to come back up here to blood trail him tomorrow, or try and find him tomorrow. I don't want to lose any meat. I don't want him to suffer if he's not dead. All of those things going through my head. And the first thing that popped into my head was, well, you didn't hear him crash. You didn't hear him. He was struggling to get over deadfall. So where could he have gone? Um, and in my head, I just kind of look around, and off to the right, not uphill, but side hill, uh, was a bunch of grass and not much deadfall, kind of paralleling the deadfall. And so, I start working my way over there, and I started finding, I wouldn't say buckets, but cups of blood again, and lung tissue, and so I was able to follow that right up to where he had died. He wasn't 80 yards from last blood, but he had broken a tree line and had gone in a direction that, I couldn't quite tell from last blood that he had gone. There's about 10 yards between last blood and then when I started finding blood again. So there was kind of a gap there that I was dealing with. But either way, found my second arrow. I want to show you guys. So one of the blades broke off, but there you go. And it was a complete pass through. And it was hanging on kind of on the fletchings, and they worked their way out. I found it on his trail getting up to where he was. But that evolution mechanical did the job that it was assigned to do, and was able to recover my elk. So of course at that point, I don't have cell phone service. I use my Garmin inReach. Text my wife that I found him. Text my buddies that I found him, the ones that I had let know that I was doing that, and then I put this bad boy to work here. So got some pictures, got the jackstone out, and I need to clean it. This is nasty, but there you go. This jackstone made quick work of that bull. I was super impressed. I was able to get the head off, do the, I guess, what do you call it? Cutting it off at the knees to get the hooves off, cutting down some weight. I didn't debone it up there on the mountain. It was only a 2-mile hike out, but I was able to get it packed out, thrown in that initial Ascent pack, which was pretty awesome. You know, the first load was really heavy. I left the bow back with the 2 hindquarters, but I took everything else out: the head, the loose meat, back straps, tenderloins, and the 2 front shoulders, all in one trip on that first night. And then the second day, I went back up there and did the 2 hindquarters. And what I did was, on the initial Ascent packs, on the top here by your shoulders, there's these wing-looking things, and I actually hooked the hindquarters to those and strapped my bow to the back of my bag and was able to carry it down. And it was really cool because it really does put in center alignment that weight, and transfers it down to your hips, and allows you to walk more upright with those hindquarters hanging off the side there. So I thought that was pretty cool. Um, and then I was able to get the meat home and get it taken care of. But I am beyond grateful for this elk season 2024. I love chasing these animals. I learned so much just in the 14 days that I was out there or so. I want to say it was 14 or so day, yeah, something like that. 14 days that I was out there. Learned a ton about myself. There's a lot of things that I need to change, and we'll get into maybe a part 2 on that. But I really had an awesome experience. Even the times that I was out there with my buddy Adam, and then the solo time, that can get hard being out there, and being solo for that long, chasing elk or whatever animal it is. Highly recommend you download some ebooks, some podcasts, whatever it may be that's going to keep you entertained where you're having to sit there. But in this particular area, I definitely learned that the biggest thing for me was having to sit and be patient to work the pressure from the other hunters that were out there, and to just be patient and let the elk do their thing, because both shots that I got were at elk that had no idea I was there, which is the coolest thing. While they're down feeding, I wasn't calling. I would sound check every once in a while with calf calls, but outside of that, no calling, just kind of letting them do their thing, and creeping in on either the bulls that were bugling or in the over-the-counter unit, just finding different trails to sit and wait and watch as they came across. So with that being said, guys, I appreciate all the support that you guys have provided me. Here on the YouTube channel, we've hit 3,000 subscribers, so that is awesome. I appreciate you for that. Also, it's something that I really enjoy doing, and I can't thank you enough for all of the support that you've provided, so that I can mess around with different gear, share my experiences with you guys, and continue to grow this channel and provide you with the content that you would like to consume, and also share my story along the way. I appreciate it. My family appreciates it. So if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to this on the audio only platforms, follow along. Leave a review wherever it may be. Those are the free ways that you can support. If you're looking to support, monetarily, the best way to do that, guys, is to go and purchase yourself some gear, or anytime you're purchasing for your friends or gifts or whatever it may be, use the links down below. It helps way more than you know, and support the partners of the show that do an amazing job with me, and also being able to give back to you guys. So it's a win-win-win, guys. You get the best price possible on this gear that I trust and that I use, and also you're supporting me as I'm able to in turn support you with giveaways and this content. So all of that to be said, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. If you're still out hunting elk, good luck. I appreciate that as well. That's such a grind. And get the work, get after it, make it happen. Good luck out there for those of you that are maybe hunting mule deer, whitetail, whatever, bears, whatever it may be. Go and enjoy the outdoors. I'd love to see you over the First Phorm Outdoors Facebook group as well. It's such an amazing community that you should be a part of. So all of that, guys, wrapped into, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. And like I always say, get out, live your life, and love it.